I was halfway through hanging the faded paper star in my living room window when the call came through. Daniel's name lit up the screen with that new photo his wife picked. Him stiff in a stiff blue shirt, a tight smile that had stopped reaching his eyes. For a second I imagined it was the usual. "Mom, can you take the kids Saturday?" Or, "Mom, do you still have that extra slow cooker?" I answered with a smile in my voice anyway. Habit is a stubborn thing. "Hey, sweetheart," I said. He didn't say hello, just breathed once, then flat. "Mum, don't come by for Christmas this year." I blinked at the star. It wobbled on its thread. "I'm sorry?" "It'll be better if it's just us. Me and Nora and the kids, low-key." He wasn't nervous. He wasn't apologetic. He sounded like someone cancelling a subscription. "Low-key," I repeated. I pressed my fingers to the glass. My reflection looked like someone else, a woman with trying too hard lipstick and a paper star hovering over her shoulder like a cheap halo. "Yeah." He cleared his throat. "Look, I'm tired of the drama." I laughed. I couldn't help it. It burst out of me like an accidental cough. "Drama? Daniel, what drama could I possibly bring? I wash the dishes before anyone dirties them. This is exactly it," he said, quick, like he'd practiced. "You make everything about you. The food, the gifts, the calling people out. It's supposed to be pleasant." The edge in his voice sent a tiny shard through my ribs. In case he'd forgotten, I swallowed and said softly, "Sweetheart, last year I paid for your tree, your ham, your kids' winter coats." "Mum." He cut me off in that hushed tone that tells you you're being watched while you're being pushed off a cliff. "This isn't a negotiation." I stood still long after the call ended, my phone heavy in my palm, the living room still smelling faintly of cinnamon sticks and the cleaner I splurge on to make things feel like hotels used to feel. Outside, the street was pretending at winter. I could hear my neighbor's dog collar shake. I could hear my own breathing, quiet and steady. I hung the star properly, then took it down. Then hung it again. Then I sat on the arm of the sofa and asked the empty room, what did I do? The room, traitor that it is, answered with memory. Daniel at 7, kneeling in the kitchen linoleum with a busted Lego set and tears he didn't want me to see. Daniel at 16, standing taller than me, asking, no, begging, to use my car to drive to the lake with friends, promising there would be no beer, that he'd be home before curfew, that he'd fill the tank. Daniel at 22, the day after the wedding, calling to ask if I could co-sign their mortgage because rates are insane and Nora's job is contract and you know how it looks to banks. Mum, the house he sleeps in is made of my signature. The car he drives is paid for with the money from the necklace my mother gave me. When Nora's startup didn't start up, I wrote the quiet checks. When the baby arrived early and the insurance turned out to be a maze designed to make you cry, I sold the last ring my husband left me. I told no one about the ring. I told the pawn shop boy to enjoy his commission. That same boy once told me I had a kind face. It occurs to me now that kind faces are useful to everyone but their owners. I didn't cry. Not yet. I made tea. I took the sugar down and put it back and took it down again. Then I dialed a number I hadn't used in some time. "Hi, Alice," I said when she picked up, her voice brisk and warm like always. "Do you have a minute?" "For you?" "Always," she said. She was my sister once removed by marriage, and my friend by many small lifelines. We'd gone to estate sales together to giggle over embroidered samplers and chipped teacups we didn't need, but would cradle anyway, as if affection could glue history back together. "What would you do?" I asked her, "if your child told you calmly that you were not welcome for Christmas? Because you're drama." On the other end of the line, a soft intake of breath. Then, I would ask what they were protecting. The truth they don't want you to see, maybe, or the lie I closed my eyes. The tea cooled undrunk. He said I make everything about me. Do you? Her tone wasn't accusing. It was surgical, efficient. She knew me too well to coddle. Or do you refuse to let them make you small? I imagined Nora's face at the last Thanksgiving, the polite smile that covered a small storm. She told me I shouldn't have brought cranberry sauce because she already made a sugar-free version. She said mine was aggressive. I almost laughed again. Aggressive cranberry sauce. I told her I'd leave it in the car. But I put it on the table anyway when she went to change the baby. Daniel winked at me and mouthed, "Thank you." He still loves it the way his father did. You are not aggressive, love. Alice said. You are generous. That's threatening to people who are counting favors, I wanted to tell her about the other little hurts. The time Nora called my sweaters grandmotherly, as if it were a slur. The way she'd take pictures of the kids and crop me out because my hands were in them, and hands are so distracting in photos, aren't they? The way she would send me lists of approved snacks, approved car seats, approved TV shows, like I hadn't raised a son who made it into college on a scholarship and a job bagging groceries at dawn. But I didn't. I said, he sounded so cold. Like a landlord calling about a missed payment. Alice said. And yet you are the landlord. Alice, I whispered, startled, genuinely startled by the simple geometry of truth. I am the landlord. I have been for years. They were renters in more ways than one. They rented my patience, my account, my afternoons. You are kind, she said, but you are not required to be a fool. We talked longer than usual. She made me laugh about her dark-son's strange hatred for her yoga instructor. She told me about a book where a mother leaves town and reinvents herself as a baker by the sea, and only writes postcards to people who deserve receiving them. I pictured flour on my hands, a window with salt spray, the quiet. It didn't feel like an escape. It felt like oxygen. After I hung up, I did 2 things I was good at. I cleaned a house that was already clean, and I made a list. Not of revenge, not yet. Of gifts I had already purchased and hidden, receipts I still had, cash flow items that lived in my name, recurring charges I covered for them without fanfare, the family Netflix, the cloud storage, the pest control contract, the HOA dues because our savings took a hit this quarter, the health club Nora insisted the kids needed because of their developmental sensory blah blah. I wrote it all down, line after line. I added up figures like my life was a ledger, not a heart. When I reached the bottom of the page, I put the pen down and looked out at the street again. Across the way, the Santorini's home had a plastic reindeer in the yard that lay flat during the day and stood glowing at night. It looked defeated in daylight, like a party guest sleeping off shame. I thought of Daniel's face when he was little, how he would lean into me in crowds, his cheek pressed against my hip, trusting my body to be a wall against the world. At what point had I started standing far away so he could learn to walk without me? At what point had they started running in a direction where I wasn't invited? The next morning I woke before dawn, as if my body knew there was a clock somewhere counting down to something I hadn't named yet. I took the old box down from the top shelf of my closet, the one with papers that mattered. Deeds, policies, the trust account, the insurance my husband and I set up back when we still thought time was a polite thing that would give you notice before it left. The handwriting on some of those documents felt like a ghost stroking my cheek. He was a quiet man, my husband. He believed in saving and in leaving a trail of breadcrumbs that money men could follow after you were gone so they wouldn't get lost. He would not have liked how much I'd diverted to the living. He would have shaken his head, kissed my forehead, and said, "If you can sleep at night, we can afford it." He knew the cost of love is rarely money, But there are other costs. By noon I had appointments set. A banker who still remembered me by name, a lawyer who had eaten my chicken pot pie at a church fundraiser once and told me it was the best bite he'd had in a decade. A realtor friend who'd joked for years that I should let her list my darling little place by the park because interest is insane right now. I didn't intend to sell my house, but curiosity is not a sin. It is a tool. I ate a bowl of soup like someone fulfilling a promise to a mother. They say you should eat when you're upset, not starve, and then I picked up my phone and scrolled through photos until I reached the album called Grandbabies. Dozens of pictures of the kids with frosting on their noses. Of Nora holding a homemade sign about her company that never became. Of Daniel asleep on my couch with a TV remote sliding out of his slack hand. If I zoomed in, there was always some sign that I was there, even in photos where I never appeared. My hand bringing a glass of water into the frame. The sweater she didn't like. My cat curled against a tiny, socked foot. The evidence of me, present and unremarked. I pressed call on Daniel again. He picked up after 2 rings. "Mom," he said, already defensive, like a man who holds a door closed with his shoulder. "We talked about this." "Yes," I said. "We did." "I just wanted to thank you, Silence." "What?" "For the gift." "Truly. Because now I don't have to pretend we're okay for the sake of some hallmark photo. I don't have to carry dishes through a room where I'm invisible, smiling like I swallowed a light bulb. I don't have to wrap presents I can't afford to replace when you return them for store credit." My voice didn't rise. It didn't shake. It finally sounded like mine, the one I used when teaching Daniel the difference between want and need. "Mom," he said, suddenly smaller. "That's not... I'm serious," I said gently. "Thank you." He exhaled hard, the way he used to when I insisted he wear a coat. "You're making this a thing." "I just wanted a quiet holiday." "Then you shall have one," I said. "Quiet as snowfall." "What does that mean?" "It means," I said, looking down at my list, at the right-hand column where I had written 3 simple verbs: review, revoke, reclaim. "You won't hear from me for a little while." He tried to pivot. He tried a joke. He tried a guilt I had inoculated myself against decades ago. "Nora thinks you're mad because we said no to your Christmas pudding." "It's not personal, Mum. Sugar isn't good for the kids." "Of course," I said. "Sugar is poison. Tradition is tiresome. Mother's a drama. Thank you for your clarity." "Don't be like this," he snapped, then caught himself. "I mean, look, we'll do something in January. Maybe a dinner or a brunch, just not Christmas." "Of course," I said again, as if the words could fold a corner in a page I would want to return to later. "Take care," I added, and hung up before he could say my name, in the way that always made me forgive him too soon. The quiet that followed was not empty. It had a shape. It felt like the inside of a church before a wedding, heavy with flowers and waiting. I stood in it and breathed and decided I would buy nothing that wasn't necessary for the next 30 days. Not a ribbon, not a spice, not the illusion that I was loved because I gave. I went to my bedroom and opened the bottom drawer of my dresser, the place where I kept the Christmas paper and the bows. I smoothed a sheet of gold paper with my palm, then folded it back into itself and slid it away. It made a papery sigh, like the sound a person makes when they stop arguing with the truth. I took the envelope of receipts from the closet, tucked it into my purse, and put on my coat. On the way out the door, I paused, took the paper star down again, and left the window bare. I decided I would let the light come from somewhere I couldn't control. I locked the door. I got in my car. I made 3 calls I knew would change everything. When I drove into the bank's parking lot, I almost expected someone to stop me, to stand in front of my hood like a protester and say, "Wait, you can't do this. You're just the mother. You're supposed to forgive, supposed to fund, supposed to sit quietly in the corner until they call for you. But no one did. The automatic doors slid open like they always had. The same little peppermint bowl sat by the teller's desk. The smell of carpet cleaner and printer ink wrapped around me like an old coat. "Mrs. Callahan," the manager said when he came out, his tie slightly crooked. "Been too long. How's the family?" I smiled, and for the first time in years I didn't answer with a litany of achievements. I didn't say, "Daniel just got promoted," or "the kids are in soccer." I said, "complicated." And he nodded like he knew what that word meant in a mother's mouth. We sat down, and I slid the folder across the polished desk. "I need to make changes," I said simply. He glanced at the papers, at the account numbers, at the authorizations. His brows lifted. "Are you certain?" "More than certain." The pen in my hand was heavier than it looked. My husband's ghost pressed on my shoulder. I remembered the day we set up the trust, Daniel only 11, still thinking money was something you got from couch cushions. "We'll secure his future," my husband had said. "We'll make sure he's never left adrift." And I had believed in that, believed in preparing the ground beneath him so he could run further than we ever did. But who prepares the ground for the one left behind? I signed, line after line, and with each stroke, something in me uncurled. Not bitterness, not yet, just a kind of power I had forgotten was mine. By the time I left, the sun had dipped low. My reflection in the glass doors looked taller somehow. I got back into my car, and on the passenger seat, my list waited. Review, revoke, reclaim. One word down. The lawyer's office came next. He remembered the pot pie. He remembered my husband's laugh. He remembered Daniel as a boy, swinging his legs in the waiting room chair. "He's grown now, right? Has a family?" he asked as he pulled the files. "Yes," I said. My voice was smooth as the leather of his chair. "A family that doesn't need me." He blinked at that, but asked no more. Lawyers understand the power of silence. He laid out the paperwork, the clauses, the amendments. He explained how easy it was to redirect, to reroute, to rewrite the story that money tells when you're gone. I didn't want revenge written in blood. I wanted it inked neatly into the future, in lines so clean no one could erase them. "Do you want him notified?" he asked. "Not yet," I said. "I want it quiet." For now we shook hands, and his palm was warm. "You know, Mrs. Callahan, sometimes protecting yourself is the best gift you can give anyone, even your children." When I walked out, dusk had swallowed the sky. Streetlights blinked awake. I sat in my car for a long moment and whispered, "One day Daniel will understand." Or maybe he won't. But either way, I'll be safe. I drove home in the dark. The house greeted me with the same stillness it always had, but it no longer felt like a tomb. It felt like a fortress. I heated leftover soup and ate it, standing at the counter, the way I used to when Daniel was little and I couldn't sit until he slept. Then I carried the empty bowl to the sink and let the water run over it. I watched steam rise and thought about all the years I had spent scrubbing, polishing, smoothing, making everything clean so others could make it dirty again. Later I pulled out the old photo album. Daniel at 5, a grin missing 2 teeth. Daniel at 12, holding up a science fair ribbon. Daniel at 20, in his gown, tossing his cap. The pages were heavy, each one a stone in my chest. I closed it gently and put it away. That night, I dreamed I was walking through snow. Behind me, footprints filled with light. Ahead, only darkness. But I kept walking. The next morning I woke with clarity. I brewed coffee, black and strong, and I didn't put sugar in it. Let it be bitter, I thought. Let it be honest. At 10, my realtor friend came by. She clicked her pen like a metronome as she looked around the house. "Market's hot," she said. You could get double what you paid. Maybe more. I'm not sure I want to sell. I admitted. She raised a brow. But you want options? Yes. I said, options. She walked through each room, making notes. In the living room, she paused at the bare window where the paper star used to hang. It feels a little empty, she said. Good, I replied. That's what I wanted. When she left, I sat at the kitchen table with my list again. Review, revoke, reclaim. 2 words down now. Reclaim would come last. That one required patience. I picked up my phone, scrolled past Daniel's number, and called Alice again. How did it go? She asked. Quiet, I said. Good. Quiet is power. I thought about that all afternoon. I thought about how many years I had confused noise for love, activity for care. Maybe true love is steady, almost invisible. Maybe that's why no one sees it until it's gone. By evening, I had done what I set out to do. The accounts were changed. The future was rewritten. The ground beneath my son's feet had shifted, though he wouldn't know it until he needed it. Until the day came when he reached for the net I had always strung beneath him, and found only air. I sat in the silence of my house, listening to the clock tick. Each sound was a drumbeat, not drama, not disposable, not erased. Christmas was coming, and for the first time in years I would not be waiting at someone else's table, hoping to be seen. I would be waiting at my own, with a plan as sharp and clean as ice. Because sometimes the cruelest thing you can do isn't to shout or slam a door. Sometimes it's to smile, walk away, and let them discover what life is without you. I didn't touch the Christmas decorations after that. The boxes sat in the attic, gathering dust, while the neighborhood slowly transformed into a parade of lights. Every evening I'd watch cars slow down to admire the Santorini's inflatable snowman or the Harrisons' glowing reindeer. My own house stood dark, unadorned, like a silent protest. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty about it. The days leading up to Christmas used to be filled with noise. Daniel's voice calling me for errands, Nora's texts sending lists of suggested gifts for the kids, my calendar crammed with reminders for school plays, cookie swaps, or babysitting duties. This year my phone was quiet. The absence of their demands was louder than any carol. I brewed tea in the mornings and drank it by the window, watching the world go on as if nothing had shifted. But everything had. On the 23rd, Nora called. Her voice was coated in sugar so thick I could taste the grit. "Hi, Mom. Just checking in. The kids were asking about you. I told them you were probably busy. You know, with your clubs." Clubs. I nearly laughed. The only club I belonged to these days was solitude. "I'm fine," I said simply. There was a pause. Then, as if rehearsed, "Daniel felt bad after your call. He didn't mean to upset you. We just wanted something smaller this year." "Of course," I said. "I understand." She hesitated, then added, "We were wondering, did you already buy the kids' gifts?" There it was. Not concern. Not regret. Just logistics. "Why?" I asked. "Well, if you did, maybe we could swing by and pick them up. It would mean a lot. You know, for continuity. The word clanged in my chest, like I was an employee being phased out, and they still wanted access to my files. I smiled, though she couldn't see it. "No," I said. I returned them. Silence stretched on the line. I imagined her blinking, her lips tightening. "You returned them?" "Yes. Refunds are useful this time of year, don't you think? Everyone likes a little extra cushion." Her voice cracked around the edges of politeness. "But the kids will be fine," I said softly. "Children adapt. That's what makes them resilient." She sputtered a little, tried to recover, and finally muttered, "Right." Merry Christmas, then. Merry Christmas, Nora, I replied, and ended the call. I leaned back in my chair, listening to the hum of the refrigerator. For years I had rushed to fill every silence with comfort, every pause with reassurance. Now I let the quiet sit heavy. Let it remind me I had choices. On Christmas Eve, Alice came by with a bottle of wine and a tin of cookies. She wore a ridiculous reindeer sweater, the antlers on the front stitched with sequins. "If you won't celebrate with them," she said, plopping onto my couch, "you'll celebrate with me. Or at least drink with me." We sat together, the two of us, sipping wine and watching an old movie. I laughed more that night than I had in years. At midnight, when the credits rolled, Alice turned to me and said, "Does it hurt?" "Of course," I admitted. "It feels like a bruise I keep pressing just to see if it still aches." "But you're not broken," she said. "No," I whispered. "Not broken. Just." Shifting the next morning, Christmas Day, the phone rang again. This time it was Daniel. His voice was strained, like a man holding a rope that was slipping through his hands. "Mom, the kids miss you." "I miss them too," I said. "You should be here," he added quickly. "They're opening gifts." "They keep asking where Grandma is." "Daniel," I said calmly. "You told me not to come." "I respected that. That's not what I meant." He snapped. Nora and I interrupted. "No need to explain. You wanted quiet. Enjoy it." His breathing was heavy in the receiver. "Why are you being like this?" "Like what?" I asked. "Distant." Cold, I closed my eyes, letting the words sink in. Distant. Cold. Words that had been thrown at me so many times in whispers behind my back when I refused to bend further. This time, I didn't flinch. "Maybe," I said softly. "I'm finally treating you the way you've treated me." He said my name then. Mom, but it didn't sound like the boy who once leaned on me in crowds. It sounded like a man trying to claw his way back into a room he had locked from the inside. I didn't answer. I let the silence fill the space between us until he finally sighed and hung up. That day, I set the table for one. I roasted a chicken, opened a bottle of wine, and lit a single candle. It wasn't the Christmas I had imagined when I was younger, when I dreamed of grandchildren crowding my knees and laughter echoing through halls. But it was peaceful. And in that peace, I realized something important. I wasn't waiting anymore. The house was mine. The money was mine. The choice was mine. For too long, I had given everything without pause, believing love was measured in sacrifices. But love isn't sacrifice alone. Love is respect, and respect is something I had long been denied. That night, as I blew out the candle, I whispered to myself, "They think they took Christmas from me." But really, I took it back, and for the first time in decades, I slept without dreams. The week after Christmas passed like a strange dream. The streets were still littered with wrapping paper and pine needles, garbage bins overflowing with evidence of family gatherings. Neighbors posted photos on social media, matching pajamas, new gadgets, squealing children. I didn't look at Daniel's page, though I knew the pictures would be there. Nora would have arranged them perfectly, cropped me out of existence as always, smiling like their joy was complete. Instead, I kept my eyes on my list. Review, revoke, reclaim. The first two were done, the ink dry on documents that shifted everything. The last one, reclaim, was the hardest. Not because I didn't know how, but because it meant letting go of something I'd clung to for too long, the belief that if I just gave enough, loved enough, sacrificed enough, my family would love me back the way I deserved. On New Year's Eve, while fireworks cracked in the distance, I sat at my desk and spread out the remaining papers. The deed to Daniel's house, the car title, The insurance policies I still paid every month. I stared at them until the clock struck midnight, until the sky outside exploded in color. And then, with steady hands, I began making calls. The first was to the insurance company. Yes, I'd like to cancel the dependent coverage, I told the agent. My voice didn't shake. The second was to the car company, requesting the title transfer back to my name. By the time I hung up, the fireworks had faded, and all that was left was smoke and silence. The next morning, Daniel called again. "Mom, the insurance card didn't work at the pharmacy." Nora was furious. "What's going on?" "I made some changes," I said simply. "What kind of changes?" His voice rose. "The kind that protect me," I replied. "Protect you? From what? We're your family." I closed my eyes, remembering all the times he'd said those same words, but with a different tone. When he wanted money, when he needed a babysitter, when he asked for my signature. Family was always his key to unlock me. "Family doesn't tell you that you're not welcome, Daniel," I said quietly. "Family doesn't use you like a resource and then discard you when it's convenient." He sputtered. "This is Nora. She gets stressed. You know how she is." I let the silence stretch until he felt its weight. Then I said, "You let her speak for you. And you let her push me out. That's on you, not her." There was a long pause. Then a soft, almost childlike, "Mom, we need help." The words twisted something in me. Not pity, not guilt, just a sharp clarity. For years I had been the safety net, the rescuer. But maybe the lesson he needed wasn't another rescue. Maybe it was the fall. "I know you do," I whispered, "but you won't find it here anymore." I hung up before he could respond. That night I stood in front of the mirror and studied my reflection. I had always seen myself as smaller than I was. Faded, background, support. But now I saw the truth. I was the foundation, the one who held everything together. And if I chose to step away, everything above me would shake. The next day I went to the house. My house. The one I had co-signed, funded, kept afloat with my quiet sacrifices. Nora opened the door, surprise flashing across her face. She looked impeccable as always, hair perfect, nails gleaming, but her eyes betrayed her panic. "What are you doing here?" she asked sharply. I smiled. "Checking on my property." Daniel appeared behind her, pale, his voice low. "Mom, please." "Not like this. Exactly like this," I said, stepping past them into the foyer. My footsteps echoed on the hardwood I had paid for. "You told me not to come for Christmas, so I didn't. But this is still mine." Nora's face flushed red. "You can't just barge in." "Actually," I interrupted, holding up the papers, "I can. My name is still on the deed, and I've already spoken to a lawyer." The color drained from her cheeks. Daniel looked between us, torn, but said nothing. I walked through the room slowly, deliberately, letting the silence gnaw at them. The kitchen still smelled faintly of cinnamon and cloves. The kids' toys were scattered across the living room. I bent down and picked up a small stuffed bear, one I had bought last year. My thumb brushed over the worn fabric, and my chest ached. Then I set it down carefully and turned back to them. "You wanted me gone," I said softly. "Now I am. But you don't get to keep everything I gave you. That's not how this works." Daniel's voice cracked. "Mom, please, don't do this. The kids will learn," I said, "just as you must." I walked to the door, my heart pounding, my hands steady. As I stepped outside, I turned back once more. "You wanted a quiet Christmas without me. Now you'll have a quiet life without me too. Think carefully about what that means." I left them standing in their doorway, pale and speechless as the winter air bit at my cheeks. That night, as I lay in bed, I realized something remarkable. For the first time in decades, I wasn't waiting for their approval. I wasn't waiting for an invitation that might never come. I wasn't waiting to be seen. I had reclaimed myself. The first week of January was brittle with cold. The kind of cold that sharpens your bones, makes every breath sting like truth. I spent my mornings walking through the park, scarf wound tight, boots crunching frost. Families passed by, mothers tugging sleds, fathers snapping pictures, children squealing with delight. I watched them without envy. Once, scenes like that had been my dream. Now I saw them for what they were. Fleeting moments. Beautiful, yes, but not guarantees. At home I started clearing out closets. Old coats, dusty boxes, shelves lined with knickknacks I'd bought for holidays no one remembered to thank me for. Each object I pulled out was a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying. I filled bags and set them by the door, ready for donation. As I worked, I found something tucked behind a stack of linens, a photo album I hadn't seen in years. It wasn't the usual one with Daniel's school portraits or holiday snapshots. This was older, filled with black and white pictures of my parents, my childhood home, my wedding day. I traced the edge of one photo, me in a simple white dress, smiling at the man who would become Daniel's father. He had been kind, gentle. He'd believed in family the way people believe in gravity, something you don't question until it lets you fall. I sat on the bed, the album heavy in my lap, and whispered, "Are you seeing this? Are you seeing what our boy has become?" Of course, there was no answer. Just the sound of the house settling, the faint creak of wood. But in that silence, I made a decision. It was time for confrontation. The phone rang 2 days later. Daniel again. His voice was tight, urgent. "Mum, Nora says you cancelled the car insurance. We can't even drive the kids to school now. What were you thinking?" "I was thinking," I said evenly, "that I no longer want to pay for people who don't want me in their lives." He groaned. "You can't just—" "I can," I interrupted. And I did. Silence. Then a softer voice. "Mum, please, don't do this. We're struggling. You've always been struggling," I said quietly. "But somehow it's always me carrying the burden. And when I stumble, when I dare to expect gratitude, I'm called drama. That's not fair," he muttered. "Fair?" I laughed, the sound sharp. "You don't know the meaning of fair. Fair was me giving up vacations so you could go to summer camp. Fair was me working nights so you could afford new shoes when yours wore thin. Fair was me signing my name on loans I knew I couldn't repay if you failed. And how did you repay me, Daniel? By telling me I wasn't welcome, he didn't speak. I could hear him breathing, ragged, through the phone. Finally, I said, "I want you and Nora to come here. Tonight. We need to talk face to face." There was hesitation, a muffled conversation in the background. Then Daniel sighed. "Fine." Tonight, when the doorbell rang, I was ready. The house smelled of fresh bread. I'd baked it deliberately, the way I used to when Daniel was small. The table was set simply, with plates and glasses, but no food, no feast. Just a stage. Nora walked in first, her lips pressed into a thin line. Daniel followed, shoulders hunched. They sat across from me, looking like children called to the principal's office. I folded my hands on the table. "You told me I wasn't welcome at Christmas. That I ruin things, that I make everything about me. Do you remember that?" Daniel flinched. Nora stayed silent. "Good," I continued, "because now you'll understand why things are changing." I slid the documents across the table, the cancelled policies, the revoked trust, the deeds in my name. Every safety net you relied on is gone. The house, mine. The car, mine. The accounts, no longer yours to touch. You wanted distance. Now you have it." Nora's face went pale. She snatched up the papers, flipping through them, her voice rising. This can't be legal." "It's perfectly legal," I said calmly. "I've spoken to lawyers. I've made sure of it." Daniel's voice cracked. "Mom, why are you doing this?" "We're your family." I leaned forward, my voice steady. Family doesn't discard you when it's inconvenient. Family doesn't call you drama for showing up with cranberry sauce. Family doesn't cut you out of Christmas and then come crawling back when the bills arrive. You wanted me out of your life. So now, I am Nora slammed the papers down. "You're punishing us." "No," I corrected softly. "I'm teaching you." The silence that followed was thick, broken only by the faint ticking of the clock. Daniel lowered his head into his hands. Nora's jaw worked furiously, but no words came. Finally, I stood. "You should go. There's nothing more to say tonight." They rose slowly, like people carrying invisible weights. At the door, Daniel turned back, his eyes glassy. "Mom, please." I shook my head. "You made your choice. Now I've made mine." I closed the door behind them, the lock clicking like a period at the end of a long sentence. I leaned against it, my heart racing, my hands trembling. But not from fear. From release. For the first time in years, I had stood my ground, and it felt like freedom. The days after that confrontation were strange. The house felt quieter, lighter, as if the very walls had been holding their breath and could finally exhale. I spent my mornings reading at the kitchen table, coffee in hand, while sunlight spread across the floor. There was a peace in knowing I had acted, that I had finally stopped being a silent benefactor. But there was also an ache, deep and stubborn, that refused to leave. On the third day, I received a knock at the door. It wasn't Daniel or Nora. It was a neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, holding a casserole dish. "Heard there was some trouble," she said gently. "Thought you might want company." Her kindness caught me off guard. I smiled, thanked her, and let her in. We sat together, two women who had seen too much and spoken too little. She told me about her own children, how one lived far away and never called, how another only visited when she needed money. "It's a cycle, isn't it?" She mused. "We give everything, thinking they'll remember." "But sometimes they don't." I nodded. "And then we're left deciding if we want to keep giving, or finally stop." Later, after she left, I thought about her words. Maybe I wasn't alone in this. Maybe mothers everywhere carried the same invisible scars. That thought gave me strength. That evening I received another call from Daniel. His voice was ragged, desperate. "Mom, we're in trouble. Nora's credit cards are maxed out, and the mortgage payment is due. We don't know what to do." I closed my eyes, letting his words wash over me. Once I would have rushed in, fixed everything before he even finished explaining. But now I stayed still. "You'll figure it out," I said quietly. "Mom, please," he begged. "The kids, they'll suffer." I opened my eyes and stared at the stack of papers on my desk, the cancelled accounts, the reclaimed titles. "No," I said. "The kids will adapt. It's you and Nora who need to learn what it means to stand on your own 2 feet." There was silence, broken only by his uneven breathing. "I don't understand," he whispered. "You don't have to." I replied. "You just have to live with the choices you made." I hung up before he could say more. My hands shook, but not from fear, from resolve. The next day, rumors began spreading. Friends from church called, asking if it was true that Daniel and Nora were in financial trouble. One even asked if I'd heard that their house might be repossessed. I listened quietly, offering no confirmation, no denial. Let the truth reveal itself. By the weekend, it did. Nora called, her voice sharp with fury. "Everyone knows, do you hear me? Everyone knows we're struggling, and it's because of you. You pulled everything out from under us." I held the phone away from my ear for a moment, letting her rant. Then I brought it back and said, "No, Nora. It's because you thought I was an endless well. You never considered what would happen if I ran dry." She hissed something unintelligible and hung up. I set the phone down calmly, almost smiling. That evening, I pulled out a notebook and began writing. Not a list this time. A letter. To myself. To remind me that I was not cruel. That I was not drama. That I was a woman who had given and given until there was nothing left. And when she finally chose to stop, she was painted as the villain. But villains don't save houses, don't raise children, don't sacrifice jewelry and sleep and years. Villains take. I had only ever given. By the time I finished, the weight on my chest felt lighter. 2 days later, Daniel showed up at my door. No call, no warning. Just him, standing there, shoulders hunched, eyes hollow. For a moment I saw the little boy he used to be, the one who leaned against me in crowds. My heart ached. "Mom," he whispered, voice breaking. "I'm sorry." Tears stung my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. I stepped aside, letting him in. He stood awkwardly in the living room, looking around like it was foreign territory. "I messed up," he admitted. "I let Nora talk me into things. I let her convince me you'd always be there, no matter how we treated you. And I didn't stop her when she pushed you out." I swallowed hard. "And now? And now I see," he said. His eyes met mine, pleading. "We need you. I need you, but not just for money. I need you because you're my mum." The silence between us stretched, heavy and trembling. My heart wanted to leap, to forgive, to erase everything with one embrace. But my mind remembered the phone calls, the words, the years of being used. "Daniel," I said softly, "I'll always love you. But love doesn't mean letting myself be trampled. You have to rebuild your life without leaning on me. Only then will you understand what I carried all these years." His lips trembled. He nodded slowly, eyes filling with tears. "I'll try," he whispered. "For your sake and for your children's." I said, "You'd better." He left soon after, shoulders still heavy, but his steps steadier than before. I watched him go, my heart torn but certain. Because sometimes love isn't about saving. Sometimes love is about letting someone learn to save themselves. A week later, word spread fast around town. It wasn't me who told anyone. Truth has a way of spilling out on its own. At the grocery store, people whispered in the aisles about Daniel and Nora's situation. At church, I caught sympathetic glances, some curious, some pitying. A few brave souls even asked, "Is it true you stopped supporting them?" I simply answered, "I stopped being taken for granted." That was enough. The real exposure came at the school fundraiser. The kids' elementary hosted it every January. A silent auction, raffles, and tables laden with homemade pies. I'd gone every year, usually the one baking 3 pies when others barely brought one. This year I decided to attend, not out of obligation but because I wanted to. I wore my best coat, a deep green one my husband used to say brought out the strength in my eyes. When I walked in, conversation stilled for a moment. I felt the hush ripple through the crowd, but I kept my chin high. Nora was there, of course, standing by the raffle table, her smile brittle, her hair sprayed into perfection. She saw me and froze. Daniel hovered nearby, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. One of the other mothers came over to hug me. "So glad you came," she said warmly, loud enough for others to hear. "It wouldn't feel right without you." Her words landed like a stone in still water. Nora's jaw tightened. Later, during the raffle drawing, Nora tried to speak with me. She cornered me by the punch bowl, her voice sharp but hushed. "How dare you show your face here after what you've done?" I sipped my drink calmly. "What I've done?" I repeated. "You mean, after I stopped paying for your life in silence?" Her eyes flashed. "Everyone's talking." "Do you know how humiliating this is?" "Yes," I said softly. "I do. I've lived that humiliation for years, being treated like I didn't belong in my own son's family. Now you finally feel a fraction of it." Before she could retort, another parent approached, smiling at me. "I heard you used to cover the auction fees some years when totals fell short. Is that true?" I nodded, modestly. "Just when it was needed." The woman beamed. "That's so generous. We're lucky to have you in this community." The look on Nora's face was priceless, her facade cracking as others saw me not as the villain she painted, but as someone respected, someone valued. Daniel came up to us then, looking weary. "Mom," he said quietly, "maybe we could talk tomorrow." Just us. I studied his face. There was no arrogance left, no entitlement, only weariness and perhaps the first glimmers of humility. "We'll see," I said gently, and walked away. At the end of the evening, they announced the top donor. It wasn't me. I hadn't written a large check this time. It was the Santorinis, who'd stepped up proudly. But when the principal thanked those who had always been there year after year, she looked directly at me. The applause that followed was warm, genuine. I felt my throat tighten. For once, I was seen for what I gave, not erased. On the drive home, the winter night wrapped around me like a cloak. I thought of Daniel's face, the cracks in Nora's pride, the whispers of the community. My story wasn't just private anymore. The truth had slipped into the open, and in that exposure, I found a strange sense of justice. When I got home, I lit a single candle on the table and sat quietly in its glow. My heart still ached. Loss always leaves scars. But the ache was different now. Lighter, sharper. It felt like healing. I whispered into the silence. If they learn, then maybe this pain will mean something. If they don't, at least I finally chose myself. For the first time in decades, I realized I had nothing left to prove. I had reclaimed my life, my choices, my dignity. And no matter what Daniel or Nora did next, they could never take that from me again. The following Sunday, Daniel showed up again. No phone call, no warning, just the sound of his old familiar knock. I almost didn't open the door. I'd promised myself I was done letting him walk in whenever guilt drove him here. But something in the rhythm of that knock pulled me back 20 years, to when he was a boy coming home from school, hungry for cookies and comfort. Against my better judgment, I opened it. He stood there in the cold, shoulders hunched, hair unkempt. He looked tired, worn, not like the polished man Nora always paraded on social media. He clutched his hands together like someone steeling himself. "Mom," he said softly, "please, can we talk?" I let him in. We sat in the living room, the silence stretching thick between us. Finally, he said, "Everything's falling apart. Nora's angry all the time. The bills are piling up. I don't know what to do." I folded my hands in my lap. "And what do you want from me, Daniel?" He swallowed hard. "I don't know." Advice? Forgiveness? Maybe just you. His voice cracked on the last word. My chest tightened. He was my son. The boy I raised, the boy I gave everything for. But he was also the man who had looked me in the eye and told me I wasn't welcome. Both truths lived in him. Both truths lived in me. "Daniel," I said carefully, "I will always love you. That will never change. But love doesn't mean I have to sacrifice myself anymore. I'm done being used." He shook his head, tears forming in his eyes. I didn't see it, Mum. I didn't realize how much I leaned on you. Nora kept saying we deserved it, that you owed us for everything you couldn't give her when she was growing up. I believed her. I let her poison me against you. The admission hit me like a gust of cold wind. Part of me wanted to rage, to ask how he could let someone twist him so easily. But another part saw the broken man in front of me, and knew rage would only build another wall. I don't owe anyone for existing, I said softly. Least of all your wife. I gave what I gave because I loved you, not because I was in debt. He lowered his head. I see that now. I don't expect you to fix things anymore. I just don't want to lose you. The words pierced through me. For so long I had felt invisible, discarded. To hear him admit fear of losing me felt like a balm I hadn't known I craved. But forgiveness doesn't erase the past. You won't lose me, I said carefully. But you have to stand on your own. You have to learn what it means to be a man, a husband, a father, without leaning on me to hold you up. Until then, we'll never really have a relationship. Only a dependency. He nodded slowly, tears slipping down his face. I'll try. That night, after he left, I sat in the quiet glow of my lamp and let myself cry. Not out of anger, not even out of grief, but out of release. For the first time I felt the bond between us shift, not severed but reshaped. Stronger, maybe. Healthier, if he chose to honor it. The next week, something unexpected happened. At church, Daniel came with the children. Nora wasn't there. When he saw me in the pew, he smiled. A small, tentative smile, but real. The kids rushed over, throwing their arms around me, their little voices bright with love. My heart swelled, and for a moment I felt whole. As the service began, Daniel leaned close and whispered, I told Nora I needed to make things right with you first. She wasn't happy, but this matters more. It was the first time in years he had chosen me over her demands, the first time he had stood his ground. And in that moment, I realized my revenge had already done its work. By taking everything back, by forcing him to face the consequences, I had given him the only gift that mattered, the chance to grow. When the choir began to sing, I closed my eyes and let the music wash over me. I wasn't the villain. I wasn't the drama. I was the woman who had loved, who had sacrificed, who had finally claimed her worth. And for the first time in a long, long time, I felt at peace. It was a quiet evening when I realized the story had come full circle. I sat at my kitchen table, a cup of tea warming my hands, listening to the clock tick steadily against the wall. For once, the ticking didn't sound like time slipping away. It sounded like life, steady and patient, waiting for no one, but no longer chasing me either. A week had passed since Daniel came to church with the children. He called me twice since then. Short, humble conversations, nothing like the frantic demands of the past. How are you, Mum? He asked one evening, his voice soft, genuine. It startled me how strange that question felt, as though I hadn't been asked it in years. It wasn't about money. It wasn't about errands. It was about me. That night, he even said, I'm cooking dinner for the kids. Not takeout. Real food. I wish you could taste it. I smiled, imagining him stirring a pot, trying to copy the meals I once made for him. He didn't ask me to come over. He didn't ask for help. And that was enough for now. Nora, on the other hand, had been silent. I didn't know if her silence meant defiance, anger, or shame. Perhaps all three. But I decided it wasn't my battle to fight. That was between her and Daniel, between her and her own conscience. I had spent too many years carrying battles that weren't mine. I wasn't going to pick up another. Instead, I turned my focus back to myself. I joined a book club with Alice. I signed up for a pottery class at the community center. I even started walking every morning, not to escape my thoughts, but to enjoy them. For the first time in decades, my days weren't shaped by other people's needs. They were shaped by mine. One afternoon, as I cleaned out the attic, I found that old paper star again. The one I had tried to hang at the window the day Daniel told me not to come for Christmas. I held it in my hands, the edges bent, the glitter faded. For a moment I considered throwing it away. But then I smiled. Instead, I hung it in the window, just as it was. Not because I was waiting to be invited back, not because I was hoping to be seen, but because it was mine, my light, my choice, my story. That evening, Alice came by with her ridiculous reindeer sweater, laughing as she carried a bottle of wine. She stopped in front of the window, looking at the star. "You put it back," she said softly. "Yes," I replied, "but this time it's not for them. It's for me." We shared a quiet dinner, and afterward, as we washed dishes together, she asked, "Do you regret it? Any of it?" I thought for a long moment. "No," I said finally. "I regret how long it took me to see the truth. I regret how many years I spent believing love meant erasing myself. But taking back my power? Number. I don't regret that Alice squeezed my hand. Good. Because you deserve better." Later that night, when the house was quiet again, I sat by the window and looked out at the glowing paper star. The street was dark, but in that little square of glass, there was light. Not for anyone else, not to prove anything, just for me. And as I sat there, I thought about family, about how it can be both the source of your deepest wounds and your greatest joys, about how sometimes family betrays you, and sometimes family finds its way back. But real family is the one that doesn't disappear when the gifts stop. Real family is the one who stands beside you even when you have nothing left to give. I closed my eyes and whispered the truth I had learned through every sacrifice, every betrayal, every act of quiet revenge. Real family isn't who you're related to. Real family is who stands beside you. And with that, I let the past go.